Welcome to Pages and Pods. The temple, the rites, and the teachings were not meaningless rituals, but disciplines of inward purification, awakening, and rebirth. The goal was not mere survival after death, nor obedience to statues and half-human gods, but a religion focused on the gradual refinement of the soul, victory over the lower self, and reunion with the highest divine reality from which life first came forth. My investigation draws from the spiritual insights of René and Isha Schwaller de Lubicz, who spent more than a decade studying the Temple of Luxor, which René understood as the Temple of Man. Through its sacred geometry, proportions, and hieroglyphic symbolism, they saw not mere legends on stone walls, but a preserved guide to the unification of the human soul with the divine creator of the world. Where René explains Egyptian cosmology with scientific precision, his wife Isha, in her book Her-Bak, brings the path of self-discovery into lived experience through the eyes of a priest initiate during his first 7 days within the holy sanctuary of the Temple of Man. In this presentation, we will explore the fundamental nature of the human soul through the dialogue between the young initiate Her-Bak and an old priest who guides him into the hidden meaning of cosmological symbols and the esoteric grammar of the Egyptian language itself. The dialogue begins when Her-Bak says to the old priest, "You promised to tell me about the Ach, the Ba, and the Ka. These are the foundational principles behind the emergence, formation, and spiritual identity of the human being born into earthly reality." The old priest replies, "The Ak is the first light emerging from darkness. It is the spiritual birth of light. In this teaching, the soul is prepared in a higher unseen state before re-entering the world of death and rebirth, so that emergence into earthly life is not a beginning from nothing, but a return from spiritual darkness into living light." You see, Osiris was not merely a mummified god, as popular Egyptology often presents him, but a sacred principle. In the language of initiation, Osiris represents the material cycle of birth, inner development, death, judgment, and rebirth, through which the soul returns again and again to refine itself until it's freed from repetition and restored to unity with the divine source. The human soul has two primary aspects: the Ka, that is the formative and earthly soul, and the Ba, the spiritual soul that remains linked to the divine source. The Ba can move between the earthly and spiritual realms, drawing near to the netters. These are not merely gods in the popular sense, but a netter is a living principle or intelligence through which divine knowledge, order, and purpose are expressed. They are the channels through which communication with the divine becomes possible. The old priest describes the Ba like a bee gathering nectar, moving from flower to flower without harming them, drawing out the subtlest essence and transforming it into a golden sweetness, pure and beyond corruption. I read this as the quest of the spiritual soul. The Ba rises towards the heaven to seek the wisdom of the netters, the pure truth of the divine, and brings it back into the flesh and blood life animated by the Ka, so that the human being may continue the long journey toward perfection. The Ka is the soul that gives form, identity, and individual consciousness to the embodied life. It is the self that passes through death and rebirth, bears the pains and temptations of earthly existence, and must be purified through moral discipline if the soul is to advance towards its divine end. Her-Bak comes to understand that man is a vessel of many forces, containing both higher spiritual principles and the impurities drawn in from earthly life. The priest deepens this insight by comparing human life to Nut, the sky god. Just as the sky travels through light and darkness, the soul travels between life and death. He says we are a tree whose fruits are the sum or harvest of lives lived by the human Ka. The roots of the tree are in the earth as long as the man works out his terrestrial destiny in a series of rebirths. Her-Bak is satisfied with what he's learned about the spiritual self, but he still asks, what of the body? Is man only flesh and blood, or does the body also have an eternal essence? The old priest explains that the physical body is the physical form of the Djet, the enduring and incorruptible spiritual body. While the flesh decays, the Djet remains, and the Ka, drawn towards manifestation, cleaves to this eternal form as a mooring post, the pole of return that anchors the soul to earthly existence. To understand how the Ka is purified, we must understand Horus, Set, and Maat. Horus represents divine wisdom and rightful order. Set is the force of division, disorder, and violence. And Maat is the principle of truth, harmony, and sacred balance by which the soul is brought back into unity. Her-Bak wants to know how to break free from the pain and desires of earthly existence. The old priest explains that the Ka is pulled by unexhausted instinctive affinities, torn between the Sethian thirst and the exalted thirst of the heart, and that it is in the heart that man finds Horus. Those who weave Horus into themselves gradually incarnate divine wisdom and order within their lower being. The old priest continues by explaining that the path to unification begins when the soul loosens its attachment to the Osirian world and turns towards the light of Horus. Horus quickens the spiritual heart, opens the mouth and eyes to what is real, and reveals the true face, the face of Maat, and lifts the Ka towards the universal life of Horus, through which the soul may finally find deliverance from the long cycle of death and rebirth. To understand Egyptian salvation and redemption, we must distinguish between the hidden creator and the manifest creator. In my understanding, Amun is the unknowable and concealed source of all existence. Ra is the radiant, perceivable outpouring of Amun. And Horus is the knowable expression of that divine light through which the netters, the living principles of reality, are made active and intelligible. Through Horus, the Ba receives divine wisdom and brings it to the Ka, so that the Ka may be purified and the Djet freed from the thirst of Set. When you seek your intelligence of the heart, the seat of your personal individuality, you will discover Maat, unity and harmony, and begin the path of true deliverance. Her-Bak concludes by saying, if I understand, the way of Horus is development and brings deliverance from the way of Osiris. The old priest replies, follow Ra, not Osiris, for the man bound to the house of earth dies, but the man who leaves it and follows Horus Ra is unbound. Ra does not return his eternal and unified Djet, Ka, and Ba to Osiris, and he dies no more. This is the mystery of Horus the Redeemer. This was the ancient path of deliverance. Pharaoh did not represent a god. He was a human being who had enthroned Horus within his heart and taken the responsibility for establishing Maat, that is, harmony and truth and right order upon all of Egypt. Yet even Pharaoh, like every soul, would ultimately stand under judgment before entering final unification with Amun. Understanding Egyptian cosmology leaves me with difficult questions. Do its teachings on freedom from rebirth echo Buddhism? Does the emanation of Amun through Horus and the Netters resemble the hidden God and unfolding divine powers of the Jewish Kabbalah? And does turning away from Set and fixing the heart on Horus reflect the same inner struggle later expressed through Christ's victory over sin and death? Are these patterns universal to the human condition? Let me know if you feel the same or if you see something I've overlooked. Keep in touch by subscribing, and until next time, may harmony and order be with you in all things.